Yeah. Amen. So the thrust is already there, even if it's not in the terms that are so readily recognizable to us. So, I mean, so yeah, getting back to James's question, I mean, I think, it's, and I'm not saying that like the term winning souls itself is like a bad term or something. It's one that is used in the New Testament, right? So it's fine if you use it the right way. I think that the point overall is that this should be a reminder to us that it's less about, how do we as kind of masters of the church, shape and reform and retool everything to be effective. It's less about that, and it's more about that just faithful reliance on what you were saying, Pastor Boisler, about what God's already provided, because He's already provided for all the different scenarios that we might encounter. So, being faithful, going back to the word that He has spoken, and just relying on what He's already giving us, I think is maybe the kind of the bigger thing to be looking at when you're trying to look at how do we, share the good news, because God's already working on that. So, like, how do we join Him and be faithful to what He's already doing, rather than try to come up with something new? So maybe, but yeah, yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So going back to the text here. So, Pharaoh, he goes in, he thinks it's a good idea. This isn't one of these good idea, bad idea things, right? So okay, I found some examples of this silly thing, right? So some examples: whistling while you work, good idea. Bad idea: whistling while you eat, and then it would show the person like gagging and choking, right? Or like what was another one here? It was like playing piccolo in the marching band, good idea. Bad idea: playing piano in a marching band, and it shows like someone like have this piano like falling to pieces, and there's like keys all over the place, and the tuba gets stuck in the so it's like, so yeah, no, this isn't a cartoon here. Pharaoh has good reason to try to like execute on this plan that he's been wanting to execute the whole time. And so he goes in, taking his best, because he has this intelligence, right? But the thing is, we already know just from the ominous description here how this is going to end. This was the trap in a lot of ways, that and it's not like it's unfair, because this is what Pharaoh wanted. God's just giving him over to be swallowed up by the serpent, to have the water be turned red, like with blood, to have the locusts driven into the sea. This is what he asked for. Think about that, right? He asked to have the locusts driven away into the sea. So he's getting what he wanted here. And so you've got this now. And even though there's this kind of perspective of faith that's like, well, hey, this is all kind of working out according to plan, isn't it fascinating? The people of Israel, however, are scared, right? They look up, it says, and they feared greatly. They see the Egyptians. But this is key, because we get back to the seeing theme all over again, right? Like, what are they seeing? What are they looking at? What should they be seeing? And I think this middle section is just all about the seeing in a very profound way, so that it's not just kind of literally, what are you looking at, guys? But the whole purpose, again, of the plague sequence and of Exodus. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And that is interesting then, because when you do have in verse 13 where it says, I mean, there's this command, it's this imperative form here, see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. As a part of that, yeah, that's right. Yep. That's right. So I mean, there's this thing that when God talks about His salvation, He wants people to see it. So that is more than just playing a trick on Pharaoh. Ultimately, here's your evangelistic thrust, really, to James. Right? He's bringing them back to Egypt. And to your point, it's not necessarily like they're backtracking, but the point being that, at least in terms of like the political domain at that time, that they would have perceived it as them going back to Egypt, whether, that was geographically the case or not. But they would have perceived it that way, that like, hey, now they're back on like, Egyptian home turf. So that this is being done in the sight of the Egyptians, right? And so in the same way that, God transforms the Nile into blood, or the staff into a sea monster serpent, changes the locust driving wind into a different direction. This is all being done in the sight of the Egyptians. So yes, it's that the people of Israel would know, but that Egypt would know, that they would see as well. And so I mean that's where you get in the New Testament this whole idea of there's going to be this salvation, like you were saying, Yehoshua. In Jesus Christ, but he's not going to just bring salvation in a corner. This isn't the Gnostic gospel where he whispers mysteries into a few people's ears. No, the salvation is worked for all to see, because he's lifted up on a cross where they put him on the Skull Hill at this busy intersection for everybody to see, with this big sign above his head. This is all done publicly so that everybody sees it. Because this is the idea of the evangelism, that you're really just pointing to what God has done. So we got this big overarching point here, right? Like, so it's it is true on the one hand that this is some faithlessness on the part of the people, but on the other hand, I don't think the point is necessarily that we're like hard on them yet. Because we're going to get there at the very end. What do we read, right? The people. Let's just skip ahead and remind ourselves, right? This is so much like the Gospel of John. It's crazy. But like the Gospels in general. But that at the end there, what's it say about seeing and what seeing does? It's in verse 31. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, so the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in His servant Moses. There it is. They see what happens, and they put their faith in Him, right? So, I mean, this is why it's ultimately happening. Like, He could have just had them keep going, but He had to have them see this moment. And so in the same way, this is like, Jesus, the Lord turning the water into wine, and then the disciples put their faith in Him. Or, of course, God lifting up His Son up on the cross so that people would see it. Because you're not going to come to faith until God opens your eyes to it, and He does it, works His salvation in your sight right before you. Yeah. That's right. Well, and then of course, just that big visible sign that everyone could see, right, on Pentecost, then testifying to His resurrection and ascension. But hey, so speaking of Pentecost and winds and elements, okay, let's just spend the last few minutes here, because we only have a few minutes now, taking a look at these elements, right? So I was mentioning that at the beginning. So you've got this angel of God. So this pops up here. This term, angel of God. And so you get the pillar of cloud moving between these two, and it's interesting, talk about hosts. The picture is armies, right? You get that term throughout. But anyway, so you get these two armies, the army of Israel and the army of Egypt. Army of Israel doesn't look like it's going to do so well. But you got this cloud that's controlling day and night, light and darkness, that moves in between them. And what's fascinating, actually, is that in the Hebrew it says the cloud and the darkness. That is referring to the same darkness that they saw in the plague of darkness, which is one of the many signs, actually, that shows how this whole cycle of plagues has been grouped up into groups of three. And that really, it's even more than the kind of the popular one that you hear about, which starts with blood, and then I guess the plague against the firstborn is just all by itself. But you can start with the snake, actually, and group them into groups of three. And then so the last three are darkness, the killing of the firstborn, and the Red Sea, all as a group here. In his power over light and darkness. So we're talking about the very beginning of creation. So I think if this is supposed to be, evoking day one of Genesis 1, right? And this is like what you're supposed to be thinking of. This is really fascinating when you've got this reference to wind, like it says in Genesis 1, the Spirit of God was over the waters, like swooping or flying or soaring over the waters. And then where everything gets covered at the end, it's like Genesis 1 is being undone on Egypt. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. Because he's the God of the whole creation. And that's, I think, really where this has all been going to. I mean, again, to the evangelistic thrust, that because of what happened in Egypt, they all learned a lesson that there is a God who is not bound by territory, that there's a God that's not just the Canaanite God or the Egyptian God. There's a God who's a God over the whole of creation, and that's what everybody saw. So it's all been pointing us to that way of opening up everybody's eyes. So thank you so much, brother. Really looking forward to Psalm 78 this week. Looking forward to it a lot. Thank you, brother. All right. We're going to be doing that Thursday, everybody. So yeah, join us for that. Moving on to Exodus chapter 15 next time. In the meanwhile, awesome stuff here. We got the Song of Moses coming up. So they celebrate and they have rest. There's Genesis 1 again. Till then, I'm Pastor AJ Espinosa. Peace. All right. Sorry, guys, about the stream cutting out on Facebook. I'm gonna have to try to figure out what's going on with that. Sometimes it seems like the phone just decides to close or stop the screencasting. But I got it up again, so at least we could keep doing the second half. But yeah, if it ever happens, just go to KFUO.org because you've got the audio stream, and they don't have the same issues that I have with Facebook. So, anyways, till tomorrow, guys.